Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories, straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a young woman must escape from a maniac when she is abducted on her birthday. So, what would you wish for if it was your birthday? Because I wish I wasn't, trapped inside the birthday box.
I got a Game Boy for my 6th birthday. It was wrapped in a nice little white box with a red ribbon. It was from my out-of-state uncle, the only person who always got me something. My mother hadn't gotten me anything, but she told me we had some batteries out in the car trunk that I could use. Given how Game Boys chew through batteries, I figured I might as well stock up. So I got my Game Boy, crawled into the trunk of the car, and started looking for batteries. I found a whole bunch of them. Some used, some not. I ended up cozying up next to an old sleeping bag and playing my game right then and there. There was this strangely comforting smell of gasoline and freshly cut grass that lulled me into a gleeful comfort. I didn't want to be in the house anyway. It could get so dreary watching my mom sit by the kitchen table, doing nothing. She was rarely, if ever, responsive. As I felt a few raindrops on my bare knees, I realized there were clouds brewing above. So I shut myself in the trunk, listening to the rain and playing my game. I had one of those flashlight extensions, so I could stay there forever. Except I couldn't. I hadn't realized that car trunks lock themselves when shut. I was stuck in there, and my mom wasn't helping me anytime soon. We lived in a small home in an isolated part of town, where most other houses were either abandoned or far off, so no one could hear me scream. Eventually, the batteries ran dry, even the backups. And as the cheerful Wario Land theme music died, it was just me, stuck in the dark, flailing helplessly to get out. It took 18 hours before someone passing by could hear me. When I was finally let out, CPS took me away and placed me with my uncle. My mother, who was diagnosed with clinical apathy, has never really been a part of my life since. So as you can imagine, I have a bit of a complicated past when it comes to confined spaces and birthdays, but I still consider myself having a happy childhood. My uncle was amazing, and he cared for me more than my mother ever did. I did well in school, I made many friends, and I did well as a point guard on the high school basketball team. You don't have to be tall to be a good point guard. I moved up to Morgantown and got my master's in business administration from John Chambers College. Ever since, I've been working hard and staying out of trouble. I've made myself quite comfortable. Still don't celebrate my birthday, though. That brings up a lot of emotions. A few years ago, I got a letter informing me that my mother had passed. I was asked to come back home to Juniper to collect her things and sign the papers in person. So, one late September afternoon, I took a trip down memory lane to say goodbye to that chapter of my childhood, once and for all. But something didn't feel right. When I arrived later in the day, the house was in shambles. It had been abandoned for years. And there was no one there to greet me. It was just me, standing in an overgrown yard listening to the crickets waking up. A one-story home with every window broken, where the white paint had peeled so much it looked like the yard was covered in dandruff. Then, someone put a bag over my head. It all went black. When I woke up, I was in immediate discomfort. My muscles ached and my back was arched in an awkward fetal position. I had this terrible urge to stretch and straighten out, but I couldn't. I was confined. I could barely move. All I could feel was rough-hewn wood, and all I could smell was vinegar and dirt. It was so strong it made my eyes tear up. I didn't understand what was going on. I fought, twisted, pushed, and screamed. Neither the walls, the ceiling, or the floor gave an inch. I got splinters all over my arms and legs. It was so oppressively dark that I couldn't even see my hands. It was also getting warmer, and I didn't even realize I was hyperventilating until I heard my own breathing. I could feel the salt of my sweat dripping into my eyes and my clothes sticking to my skin, like wearing a nylon shirt in the rain. There were these wildly irrational, panicked thoughts that came to me all at once. But the first and foremost was the feeling that maybe I never got out of that car trunk all those years ago. Maybe all of this had been a hallucination. Maybe I was still that 6-year-old kid, trying to find my way out, dreaming of the world outside. Hell, maybe my Game Boy was still around. I snapped to attention. There were footsteps and they were coming closer. There was an echo. I was somewhere enclosed and spacious. Someone outside was walking on concrete.
Have I got a treat for you, birthday girl?
Rasped a whiskey-torn old voice.
Have I got a treat for you?
A man, possibly middle-aged, maybe older. I seized up as I slowly came to realize I'd been abducted. I couldn't think of a reason for someone to lock me in an actual box other than some terrible, nefarious purpose. 1,000 troubling thoughts passed through my mind at once. Everything from being sold to tortured. I held my breath.
I'm sure you'll enjoy this.
He continued.
I'm sure you will be pleased.
I don't know what I was thinking. I started hitting the walls, screaming to be let out. I screamed and begged and threatened and cried, and I was getting so frustrated I couldn't even hear him responding. The tears wouldn't stop. Finally, there was a loud bang. A hammer coming down on the box and something piercing my skin. He'd hammered a nail in to make a point, and it had been close enough to scrape my knee.
Don't be so emotional,
said the man.
It would make things easier if you weren't so emotional.
I quieted down, but I couldn't slow my breathing. There wasn't enough air in the world to fill my lungs, it seemed. The man outside waited patiently, then left the room with a jaunty whistling.
Beautiful birthday girl,
he said as he left the room.
Beautiful, perfect birthday girl.
There was a loud chunk as a metal door slid shut. I thought back on that day where I'd been locked in that trunk. I thought about the smells and sensations. Gasoline and fresh-cut grass. Now, there was vinegar and musty wood. A bit of mold, perhaps. Wherever I was, it was old. I decided I needed to take control. There would be no one passing by to help me this time. I had to be proactive, even if everything in me screamed to just curl up into a ball and weep. I had to do something. I forced myself to map everything in my immediate environment, to figure out if there was something I could use. I slowed my breathing and carefully ran my hands across the surface of the box. I calculated that it was about 3 feet across and an almost perfect square. There was a slight gap in between some of the planks, but there was another layer of wood outside. It also seemed like the entire box had some sort of fabric wrapped around it, as I couldn't hear wood scraping whenever I shifted the box. It was a smooth fabric. Cotton, maybe? I also realized that I'd been out cold for at least 12 hours. My birthday had been a day off, so if he was congratulating me, I must have been out long enough for midnight to pass. You can get pretty far in 12 hours, so there was no way for me to know how far he'd taken me. My fingers brushed against something smooth. My Game Boy? No. My cell phone. I came to realize that I still had all my belongings. My car keys, my cell phone, my jacket. I took off my jacket and propped it up to relieve my back a bit. Then I got my cell phone out. The brightness blinded me. It took me several minutes just to adjust my eyes, and even then they were still getting watery. I wiped them over and over until I could finally see something. The battery was at about 34%. Not great, but serviceable. I dialed the emergency services immediately, but I couldn't get through. There was no signal, no internet connection. We were off the grid. Way off the grid. Maybe underground? I tried lying on my back to kick the wall out, but I just couldn't get enough momentum. The planks were rough, but I couldn't get them to buckle. The only side I wasn't entirely sure of was the floor. I tried standing and pushing myself upwards, but nothing moved. I closed my phone to save on battery and kept exploring the rigidity of the box. I was at it for more than an hour, just pushing myself against the planks. Still, nothing budged, but I refused to stop trying. I took a breather when I suddenly heard the door open again. It was pretty far off, and I could hear echoing footsteps coming my way. Someone coughing, clearing their throat. It sounded like he was smoking.
All right, birthday girl.
He sighed.
Time to get started.
There was a loud banging again, but not on my box. And something nearby, another wooden surface. Something across from me. Another box?
Let me know when you're ready.
He continued.
I'm right outside.
Ready for what? I yelled back. What are you talking about? There was no response. Instead, he just walked away, closing the large door behind him. Moments later, there was a scream. A young woman. It was muffled, but clear and close by. I shifted around in my box to come closer, only to realize our boxes were literally next to one another. There were two of us. Hello? I called out. Hello, who are you?
What's going on?
She called back.
Who are you?
We're trapped, I said. We're both trapped. I tried to explain to her what I knew. I had her confirm everything on her end, that she was also in a box, roughly 3 feet across, that she also had a phone, but no service or internet connection. We smelled the same things, saw the same things, and had both been taken suddenly and in the last 24 hours. I got so wrapped up in it that I barely remembered to ask anything about her as a person. Finally, she learned my name, and I came to know her as Lorette, or Lori for short. He came in to talk to me a couple of times. I sighed. He keeps calling me birthday girl.
Maybe he was, talking to me?
Said Lori.
It's my birthday.
Mine too, I said. That can't be a coincidence. It was eerie, but it didn't explain anything. We tried to find more commonalities. I was 28 at the time. Lori was 21. We were both women, but we had wildly different backgrounds. She had a family with 3 sisters and 2 brothers. I'd been alone with my uncle. She went to public school. I'd had a private tutor. My hair was black. Hers was brown. My eyes were brown. Hers were green. We had basically nothing in common except for our birthday. And it didn't lead us anywhere. We stayed in there for hours. At first, I'd felt that tinge of hope, knowing someone might help me, that we could help each other. But now it was growing increasingly clear that this just meant we were stuck together. 2 victims, rather than 1. Lori wasn't about to give up. While I'd resigned myself to preserving my energy, she was still in denial. She was kicking, punching, and pushing against the planks, hoping something would give way. Of course it didn't. But she stopped for a second.
There's something in the cracks.
She said.
Some, insulation. I got short nails, I can't.
I brought out my phone and checked. And yes, looking into the spaces between the planks, I could see some kind of white insulation. A piece of it was poking out just far enough for me to reach it. I pulled out strips from a towel, drenched in some sort of vinegar. I conveyed the information to Lori, who tried to make sense of it.
Maybe he's, covering up the smell?
She said.
If we die in here, vinegar can soak some of that up.
So we're in for the long haul. Days, maybe weeks.
Oh my God.
Lori started weeping. I could hear her rocking back and forth, her box shifting slightly. But there was another sound as she did. A rumbling. A deep, dark rumbling. I wrapped my jacket around me like a blanket. It was getting cold, and I had to preserve my energy. You get exhausted quicker in the cold. At some point, Lori and I were just leaning against our boxes back to back, talking about whatever came to mind. Whatever made us remember that we were in this together, and that we weren't alone. The man hadn't come back for several hours, but it might as well have been days. I talked about my uncle, my job, my mother, anything that crossed my thoughts. Lori told me about her cats, and how she was saving up for a college degree. We were just thinking out loud. And when the words ran dry, we fell quiet. I felt like I'd known her all my life.
There's no water.
Lori sighed.
Without water, we won't last long. I'm already thirsty.
Try not to think about it, I said. Try to think of something else. Like an itch.
Great. Now I'm itchy and thirsty.
She got a laugh out of me. An honest-to-God laugh. Suddenly, the door opened. Our laughter died, and the footsteps came closer. I heard a deep inhale, followed by a ripe cough. Definitely a smoker. He stopped just ahead of us, saying nothing. I decided to just wait and listen. There could be something out there. A hint.
You're not feeling up to it, birthday girl. You're not enjoying your present.
The raspy voice asked.
I'm sorry. I'll do better next time.
Lori couldn't help herself. I could hear her shifting in her box. I don't want anything from you. I want nothing, and you have to release me. I could hear the man turn around. I got the impression that he'd been facing away from us. Strange.
Excuse me.
He said, his voice shifting.
I wasn't talking to you.
Then listen to me, I said. She's right. You have to let us out. There was a loud bang against the side of the box. He kept hammering at it over and over again. Despite several layers of planks and insulation, the sound was deafening. I covered my ears, closed my eyes, and waited for it to be over. Seconds later, he was done. I could hear him panting and coughing.
Shut up!
He yelled.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut your pretty mouths when I'm talking to her!
A chill crawled up my spine. If he wasn't talking to either of us, there was someone else in the room. I could hear a groaning noise, like metal being bent from pressure. Then a thump. A big, fat footstep slapping against concrete. I held my breath, trying to paint a picture in my mind. I couldn't make anything of it. I'd never heard anything like it.
There we go, birthday girl.
The man said.
There we go. Nice and easy.
I could feel the pressure shift as something large came down, slamming into the box next to me. Something large that moved with great effort. But as Lori started screaming, it seemed to pick up speed. It got angry. Or excited. I could hear creaking wood and snapping nails as Lori's box was being torn open plank by plank. And the more she screamed, the angrier it seemed to get. The air shifted as her screams were flung high into the air. Both she and the box were hoisted at least 15, maybe 20 feet up. Her screams turned shrill as they bounced off the concrete walls. Planks breaking, fabrics torn. And now I could hear her terrified shriek as clear as day. She was out of the box. And whatever was on the other side made her cry like a cornered animal. There was a loud crunch, like massive teeth biting into a ripe apple. And Lori fell silent. I sat there, shaking. I tried not to breathe or imagine what was happening outside. I tried my best to be anywhere else. And for the first time in my life, I wished and begged to be back in the trunk of that car, playing my Game Boy. I could hear things falling against the concrete. Planks, nails, and something wet. Chunks.
There, birthday girl.
He shushed.
Aren't you gonna open your other gift?
Another groaning noise. More chunks falling from above. Bones breaking, splashes of liquid.
All right, I'll be back in a bit. Love you, birthday girl.
There was a kissing noise, followed by footsteps. Wet footsteps. And he whistled a jaunty tune all the way out the door. I had 3 minds inside my head at that moment. One mind wanted to scream and bash myself bloody against the walls. Another mind wanted to curl into a ball and cry. But in the back of my thoughts, there was a little mind left. It had grown there for years, festering from a wound back from when I was locked in that trunk as a kid. And that third mind was telling me to listen. It was telling me that no one was coming to save me. And it was telling me I had to keep trying. So I listened. There were still little things falling from above. But what I was just now realizing was that the floor seemed further down. There was either a hole next to me, or my box was elevated. I T-ried, shifting back and forth. The box barely moved. I decided on a direction and kept shifting that way. Inch by inch, throwing myself against the side of the box. Finally, there was a stop. Some kind of threshold. That first mind was screaming at me to panic. to kick and scream. That other mind was telling me to give up, but that third mind just kept telling me to stay calm and to try. It could be a short drop that would just put me on the floor and change nothing. It could be a long drop, killing me. Or maybe something I couldn't even imagine. So I threw myself against the threshold, and I threw myself at it again. And again. This time the trunk would pop open. It had to. There was a slight shift as I felt the box clear the threshold, and as I pushed further, I could feel that there was no more ground to support me. The further I pushed, the more it gave way. I was balancing on an edge. I could feel it. I could lean back, staying upright. Or I could push forward and tip myself off a cliff. And while two voices were screaming at me to wait, it was that third voice that came through the loudest. And it was telling me to fall off that damn cliff. So I fell. The world turned on its head, and I felt my stomach rise to my throat. It all came to a stop with a violent crash, and I could feel the dimensions of the box shift. It was no longer a perfect square. Something was broken. I could feel one of the walls giving way. I started kicking. I kicked and kicked and kicked. Either my legs would give or the wall. And the way the planks were bending, I was betting it all on my legs holding for just a little longer. And suddenly there was a gap. Just a few inches, but I could see outside. I brought out my phone and used what little battery I had left to turn on the flashlight. I could see a concrete floor with splotches of blood. Further in, there was a chunk of flesh, or possibly skin. Broken planks littered the ground. With the wall of the box broken, the vinegar-soaked insulation gave way. There was a stench of blood so powerful I could taste the iron on my tongue. Moist, warm flesh. I tried not to think about it. I kept kicking. And as I did, the door opened again.
Was that you, birthday girl?
A voice called out.
Did you open your...
The footsteps stopped. Then he started running.
No!
He complained.
No, 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 no!
I kept kicking, and with one final push, the entire side of the box fell away. I could only see parts of him. He had a flashlight, but I couldn't see what he pointed it at. It was like looking at him through a wooden frame. A man in his 50s, malnourished, with sunken eyes and thinning hair hidden under a green baseball cap. But he didn't look at me. He looked at something in the center of the room. Something big and groaning.
I didn't open your present,
he said.
It broke. I'll get you another one.
There was a loud puff, like an exhale. The man shook his head and carefully stepped forward. He held his hands open in surrender.
I love you, birthday girl. I love you. It's your favorite, I made sure. They have that date you like.
He moved out of sight. There was a thump as something came down next to him. Something wet that stretched across the floor. Something pulsating, throbbing.
You want me to put the present in a new box?
He asked.
You want something else? Roast chicken? Sunflower seeds? I know you love the blue ones.
There was a sudden shift as something large moved. I could hear him fall to the floor, bowled over like a pigeon hit by a truck. There was a newfound fear in his voice. His flashlight disappeared, turning the room as dark as a grave.
Honey,
he wheezed.
I'll get you a new one. You'll get a new present. I'll...
Another thump, followed by a piercing shriek. Whatever was out there was making itself busy with my assailant. This was my chance. I crawled out of the box. I almost slipped on the blood, but I managed to steady myself. I didn't turn to look. I didn't do anything but to listen to all the little voices in my head, now in complete unison. Run. He begged her to stop. He screamed and pleaded, but nothing changed. I heard bones snapping and tendons tear. The sound of those big teeth biting into a ripe apple. And as his panic gave way to maddening acceptance, he started laughing. He laughed like I'd never heard anyone laugh before.
This day will be all yours but birthday girl. No one else can have your birthday. No one else. No one!
but I didn't stop, and I didn't look. And as his laughter came to a crunching stop, I burst through the metal door. I scrambled up a spiral staircase, and as I collapsed into an old, abandoned tobacco field, I made a 911 call so frantic I can't remember a word of what I said. As my phone finally died, I was left on my own. Only a single voice remained, whispering gently into the back of my mind. I made it. I made it out of the trunk. Well, that was a few years ago. I was the third kidnapping victim of this man, and I was the only one who made it out. You might have read about it. It wasn't too far from Greenbrier Valley. It was a big deal for about a week. I'm bringing this up now because the investigation has been in a standstill for years. They've determined that he acted alone and that he worked as a consultant at a local law office. He had access to a lot of confidential information. That's how he picked his victims. The first victim, which I never met, also shared our birthday. There's a lot of strange things going on surrounding this. They worked on the initial report for days, but when it was finalized, it barely said anything but nothing to report. Strange how it can take days of investigation to come to that conclusion, especially considering what they must have seen when they first entered that old storage cellar. The case is officially closed, but I know there's more to it. But for now, I'm just happy to be out of the trunk. For good.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man searching for a home runs into trouble when he stumbles upon a haunted house. So, are you afraid to live in a big house alone? Because if not, you might see the many deaths of the six-door house.
I've been waiting to talk about this. I've been looking for others with similar experiences, or I don't know. Maybe I hoped I was insane. Months have passed, and I still don't have the slightest idea what to believe. But no matter what is true and what isn't, the memory of what happened to me is as true as can be. And every time I put my hand to a door, I tremble. I was looking for a house in the surrounding area. I know being a homeowner at 27 seems like a dream. I know I've been fortunate. Even so, I wanted something remote, spacious, and comparably cheap. I'd been looking for something nearby, but everything even close to a larger city quickly ran out of my price range. It wasn't until I started looking at the rural outskirts that I started to see something realistic. I'd been to 4 open house showings in the past week when I came across an ad that looked too good to be true. Another open house, but this one was just perfect. Apparently, they were looking to make a quick sale after a previous deal had fallen through. I made my way to a small nearby town called Tomskov. There was a little billboard with a blue sunflower greeting me, and I took a hard right down a street named Sun Plenty Road. There were only 5 houses there, and the one I came to look at was at the far end. Even from a distance, I could tell I wasn't the only visitor. I parked on the street outside and took in the sights. There was an open house sign outside, again with the sunflower logo. There was a separate garage, and the house itself was smaller than expected. Homely, but small. I was greeted by a cheerful man. He had thick glasses, a receding hairline, and the kind of fun uncle smile that told me he could get away with anything.
Come on in,
He said.
you're gonna love it.
There was me, the realtor, and 3 other people, a middle-aged couple, and a younger woman. She had this messy black hair that kept poking her in the eye. Even at a glance, I could tell the young woman was distraught. She wasn't even looking around the house. She seemed more interested in the people wandering about. The house had a simple and open layout. The bottom floor had a bathroom, a separate study room, an adjoining kitchen, and a lounge area. There were stairs leading to a sort of catwalk on the second floor, making the main room wide open. The second floor had another bathroom, a bedroom, and a guest room. It had this sort of sullen 70s vibe with gray and white flower-patterned wallpaper. There were little scuffs and tears pretty much everywhere, but the house itself seemed fine. The realtor, Anders, showed me all the details of the kitchen. He assured me that most of the appliances were to be replaced before the next homeowner moved in, and proudly displayed the new garbage disposal. It was a nice enough setup. but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the young woman standing outside the study. I got the feeling that she was standing guard. As the middle-aged couple walked downstairs, they asked her, could they have a look?
No,
She answered with a shrug.
you can't.
Don't mind her.
Anders the realtor smiled.
Of course you can.
No,
She insisted.
they can't.
Anders walked up to her and leaned in. His demeanor shifted. They argued back and forth, and I could hear her repeat over and over.
This is not what we agreed to.
The middle-aged couple and I just looked at one another. While the realtor and the young woman argued, we introduced ourselves. I smiled and gave them my name. They were named Helen and Sebastian, or Seb for short. Typical Midwestern salt-of-the-earth kind of people. They were suffering from an empty nest and seemed to want a place to start over. They made no secret about being interested in the place, although Helen wasn't sure about having no direct access to the garage. Seb, on the other hand, wasn't sure about the soil. He wanted a proper garden, and the soil seemed ill-fit to sustain greenery.
Still,
Helen smiled,
best place we've seen so far.
Sure is.
added Seb, giving Helen a little shake. Anders kept arguing with the young woman. I could overhear her name as Whitney, and she was not willing to cooperate. Finally, Anders just pushed past her, putting his keys in the lock.
Right this way. We'll just take a quick peek.
We're not done in there.
She said.
You can't just...
It was supposed to be packed up, Whitney. I can't help that you're late.
That's not... Please, give me an hour.
You've had plenty of hours.
He clicked the door open and pushed it in. The three of us gave Whitney an apologetic look as we stepped inside. The study was a mess. Old clothes strewn across various furniture, loose papers and books haphazardly thrown across a musky desk, an entire wall of bookshelves full of textbooks, ranging from discrete mathematics to philosophical physics. I stood there for a few seconds, taking it all in. Whitney pushed past us, grabbing an empty box from the floor.
Don't touch anything.
She sighed.
Just look at it and leave.
Anders leaned over to us, lowering his voice.
You have to excuse her.
He whispered.
There were some complications with the former owner.
Oh, she's the daughter?
Seb asked. Anders nodded. While Anders told us about the east-facing windows and the top-of-the-line air conditioning system, I couldn't help but to keep my eyes on Whitney. She was rummaging through the desk, dropping mementos, pictures, and notebooks into one of her many cardboard boxes. I could tell she was sleep-deprived. She kept yawning. Helen seemed eager to just leave Whitney to her grieving, while Seb kept to the practical details. He checked the hardwood floor, the insulation on the windows, the wall linings for pests. At one point, he almost knocked over a coffee table, and Whitney came running. She caught a vase that was about to topple off the table.
Don't touch anything.
She cried out.
Just, if you have to be here, stay still.
I'm, sorry.
Seb said.
I was just...
Just go over there.
She waved her hands around, shaking the vase. There was a little rattle coming from it. She shook it again, and I could see the color fade from her cheeks. Carefully, she tipped the vase, and something dark plopped into her hand. A large bronze key. Whitney pulled her hand back, letting the bronze key clatter to the floor. She covered her mouth, forgetting how to exhale. We just looked at her, having what seemed, to us, like a mental breakdown.
Nobody move.
She gasped.
Nobody. Do anything.
We all just stood there. Helen and Seb barely breathed, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of how still my feet were. Anders wasn't impressed. If anything, he was fed up with this. He rolled his eyes and picked up the key.
Whitney, I'm sorry. You're gonna have to wait outside.
Please put that down.
You can put it with your things and take it outside.
Just don't move. You don't know what you're...
Anders opened the door, stepped out of the study, and headed straight for the front door. Whitney dropped everything and ran after him. The rest of us followed suit.
Wait!
She called out.
Please wait!
As soon as Anders put his hand on the front door, Whitney stopped dead in her tracks.
Anders, please, I'm sorry.
She said.
Just step away. Give me the key. I'll leave, I promise. I swear.
That's enough of that.
No?
He opened the door and took a step forward. The bronze key passed the threshold. We'd all stepped into the main lounge by now, and I heard the door to the study slam shut. There was a sort of pressure shift, making the wind move through the main lounge. Every door in the house slid shut with a click, all except the front door, which was wide open. But there was nothing there. Not nothing as in no one standing there. No, nothing as in a nothing. Just a blank, black space. A viscous fluid where sunlight ought to be. Endless, abyssal ocean. I stared at it, mesmerized. The contrast of the bright sun coming in from the windows, bouncing off the ripples of this deep ocean doorway. And there, in the dark, humanoids. Tall, elongated silhouettes. Anders stepped back, but it was as if parts of him refused to move. His arms were locked in place, seemingly by an invisible force. And as he stepped back, something started pulling him in. His limbs grew long and twisted, his knees bending and snapping at impossible angles. His scalp pulled backwards, the loose skin of his face revealing the bottom white of his eyes.
Help.
It was all he managed to say as he was pulled into the dark. Limbs were quietly ripped from his sockets as his human frame was bent, twisted, torn, and mangled. Black water mixing with marrow as dark shapes turned Anders into what resembled an underwater cloud of flesh and claw. Whitney threw herself forward, slamming the door shut, leaving the bronze key on the floor. Screams erupted, and I didn't even notice they were mine. It was this primal force being pulled out of me, this need to scream. Like a baby desperate for her mother. Helen backed into a corner and sunk to the floor, with Seb trying his best to comfort her. Whitney just sat there looking at the bronze key, her face breaking out in cold sweats. I felt something turn in my stomach and headed for the bathroom. Whitney ran after me, but she couldn't make it in time. I burst through the bathroom door and collapsed on the floor, hyperventilating. Whitney stayed outside looking at me in shock.
You're fine.
She said.
You're okay.
I wasn't. But compared to Anders, panicking on the bathroom floor seemed like a mercy. Whitney stayed with me as I calmed down. Seb and Helen joined us. After a few minutes of silence, Whitney excused herself. She came back with a pile of notebooks. She sat down across the hall from me, making sure not to enter the bathroom.
My dad, he found something.
She said.
I wasn't sure exactly what.
We should leave.
Said Helen.
We should leave right now.
We can climb out a window.
Said Seb.
If the door is...
Just, please,
Sighed Whitney.
just stay. We'll figure it out.
I mean no offense,
Said Helen up.
but what on earth was that?
Whitney turned the notebook to a specific page and read aloud.
I've been marooned in this house for 30 days. I never know where the door is. Sometimes I can hear water, sometimes not. I tried the windows, but it nearly burst my eardrums from the pressure as water came rushing in. I can't leave. I can't move. They wait behind the door. They wait for me to open.
Whitney scratched her head. Helen looked back and forth, as if waiting for something to make sense. Seb just shook his head.
What does that even mean?
Asked Helen.
What happened?
It has to do with the doors.
Whitney explained.
They wait behind the door.
There's nothing there.
Said Seb.
There's light coming through the windows.
It's not that easy. It's when you open it.
That doesn't make any sense.
Whitney stood up and handed Helen 3 notebooks.
We can argue the details of Dad's quantum entanglement experiment later, but that's not going to help us.
So, let's just go then.
Said Seb.
Let's leave.
You want to take your chances on the front door? That it won't come back? Go ahead.
Seb took a few tentative steps up to the front door. Helen wanted to protest, but she just started looking back and forth. Whitney crossed her arms and turned away.
I can't hear anything.
Said Seb.
Are you sure it's there?
It's somewhere.
said Whitney.
I don't know the rules. It has to do with the doors.
I got up off the bathroom floor and looked at them. Seb took his hand off the front door and stepped back. Whitney turned her attention to...
You put yourself at risk.
said Whitney.
That could have killed you.
The bathroom?
The door to the bathroom, any or all of these doors, it could be connected. Here, let me...
Whitney walked up to Helen and took one of the notebooks back. She turned to one of the latter pages.
The framework of passageway. Concept of thought. Paired in alignment, the darkness standing shy from the mirrored back of Empyrean. Realm unwilled and unbound, misshapen by collective subconscious. We cannot pass. Our world forgotten blocks dissipated. Like a bridge cannot be built of water, and a house cannot be built of wind. But the great craftsman blames not their tools, and eternal gold can be found in humble bronze.
Bronze, I said, like the key.
Look, my dad, we weren't on speaking terms. I've looked at all this for days, and all I can tell is that he was off his rocker. He died in that room.
Whitney pointed to the study. Helen hugged Seb tight, holding back a sob.
He couldn't leave. He was convinced that the door would eat him.
Helen sat down by the kitchen table. Thankfully, there was no door in between the kitchen and the main lounge. Seb walked straight up to Whitney, grabbed her by the collar of her blouse, and slammed her up against the wall, his calm demeanor cracking at the seams.
We shouldn't be here,
He said.
This is your fault.
I didn't know. It was all just ramblings. I didn't have time to clear it all out. How could I have known?
You recognized the key.
Said Helen.
You chased after him. You asked him to wait.
That's the only part that keeps coming back.
Whitney yelled.
Check the notebooks. The key, it's everywhere. It's everything.
So what do we do?
Seb asked.
Do we use it or destroy it?
Whitney looked at the pile of notebooks she'd managed to gather from the study. It was only a handful of everything we'd seen in there, but it might be enough to get some semblance of an answer. The house had 6 doors: the front door, the bathroom door, the study room door. On the top floor, there was another bathroom door, a door to the guest bedroom, and the main bedroom door. The bathroom door on the bottom floor was already open and considered safe. I could step in and out without a problem. Whitney explained as best as she could. Her father had grown increasingly paranoid since divorcing Whitney's mother. He'd locked himself in his house, committing fully to his studies. He'd always been a bit agoraphobic, and having a reason not to leave the house was a bit of a blessing in disguise. But over time, that blessing turned into a curse. An early entry read, "For years I've longed for the presence of mind to devote myself, and now that I can, I find myself wanting. I can't be certain. There is a door, a passage. It binds itself seemingly spontaneously. There is a risk involved, and it is a risk I cannot take." Seb tried to call for help, but water started pouring out of his phone. Whitney found a page about semi-passages, or shortcuts. Things that could be used as portals to another person or place. They weren't as conceptually clean as a door, and thus wouldn't invite them. But the connection would go through that dark place, the place that somehow her father had stumbled upon. I looked at the key for a long time. I didn't dare to touch it. It was unassuming in a way. It was old, had this sort of blocky texture, like it was made of little squares. While Helen and Seb rifled through notebooks, Whitney looked up and talked to me.
He just wanted a way to go wherever he wanted, without having to traverse the space in between. To just go from one door to another. All he needed was a key.
But why now? How are we trapped? I asked. We got in here just fine.
The realtor.
Sighed Whitney.
He tried to leave with the key. I think that triggered it.
So how do we untrigger it? Whitney shrugged and pointed to the notebooks. We had endless discussions. We compared notes, drew out theories. Helen thought we could force the bronze key out a window, but Whitney theorized that it'd just leave us locked inside. I suggested we listened at each door, just to eliminate which ones were safe and which weren't. We tried, but there was seemingly no way to tell. Sometimes I could hear rushing water on the other side, scratches on the wood. Other times, nothing. Even going back to the same door, it'd sound differently each time. We considered opening several doors at once. We spread ourselves out. I was at the upstairs bedroom door, right next to Seb, by the guest room door. Whitney was downstairs by the study door, and Helen insisted on the front door. We all put our hands on the handles. I wasn't sure if I could hear something on the other side or not. My heart was pounding too loudly. There were 6 doors. 5 were closed. 1 open. Someone was probably going to die.
There is only ever one door. He only speaks of it as a singular. It can change over time,
Said Whitney.
This is our best shot.
We can't know for sure.
Said Seb.
And why do we even want to open them all? There's nothing in the bedrooms, right?
We're excluding, I said, like we did with the downstairs bathroom,
We should close it.
said Helen.
Shouldn't that improve our chances of our other doors being okay?
I have no idea.
Sighed Whitney.
Are we doing this?
Seb backed away from his door, taking the hand off the handle.
It ain't right.
He said.
None of it. It ain't right.
Everything erupted into an argument. Seb couldn't bring himself to risk his life for anything less than an exit, and Helen couldn't stop crying at the thought of that dark abyss. I couldn't blame her. To this day, I can't stop imagining it. Whitney, trying to act as a voice of reason, read aloud from one of the notebooks.
The concept of the passageway, the door, changes at the flick of a thought. An alien thought, like an invisible, uncontrollable shadow of the psyche. It refuses to be controlled. My exit could be my end, or as likely, a wooden frame. Much like we cannot control the smoke of a campfire, we cannot foresee the turning of the passageway.
We all looked at one another. Helen collapsed by the front door crying. Whitney was close to a mental breakdown. I felt this enormous burden settle in my stomach, like I was missing something,
Let's take the door off the hinges.
said Seb.
We'll turn it into an arch. Then it ain't a door anymore. You think that'll work?
In theory, maybe.
Said Whitney.
But how do we do that without opening it?
We'll take the whole frame off.
Seb said.
There's a crowbar under the sink. Saw it when I checked the garbage disposal.
Helen bent down next to the sink, put her hand on the kitchen cabinet handle. I gasped. Was that considered a door? Could it kill her? Would it? I imagined that dark, cold abyss. That enormous force pulling me in, turning my very form into this unrecognizable mass. Where no screams can be heard. All I'd have to show for such unimaginable anguish would be a burst of bubbles. Then nothing. No! I cried out. Stop! But it was too late. Nothing happened. Helen opened it, pulled out the crowbar, and that was that. But for a brief moment, I realized how Whitney's father must have felt. That uncertainty, not knowing for sure if that one flick of the wrist would be damnation or nothing. Helen handed the crowbar to Seb, while Whitney gave me a pat on the shoulder. I couldn't stop crying. My whole body was shaking from the sudden rush of adrenaline. Meanwhile, Seb walked up to the front door and started tapping the wood. The theory was this: if there was no door, nothing could come through. There was no point in doing a test run, because if it didn't work, someone would lose their life either way. It was better to have an honest chance of getting out. Whitney gathered towels. She had this idea that maybe water might start leaking if the door was turned into a semi-passage, like a window. If so, we might have to find a way to quickly stop the flow. By the time we got the towels, Seb started working on the door frame. As that first crack rang out, I heard a click. The front door slid open. Without a moment's thought, Seb pushed it close. It had barely opened an inch. We all held our breaths. We were fine. Nothing was happening.
It's clear.
Helen called out.
There's nothing there. I saw it. It was nothing.
It can change.
Whitney yelled back.
We can't take that risk again.
Like hell we can't.
Seb put his hand on the front door, but Whitney tackled him. The crowbar fell to the floor as Helen rushed forward to help.
Listen.
Whitney yelled.
Just listen.
A rumble, like a great whale passing in the distance. It was right there, on the other side of the front door. Without a word, they all stood up and backed away. The door shook from the passing force. Something was definitely there.
Then the rest should be fine,
said Seb.
We can get to the study.
Whitney nodded, and the two of them burst into a sprint. Helen wasn't convinced, but didn't know what to say. Whitney dropped her crowbar, and as she bent to pick it up, Seb opened the door to the study. Darkness.
No.
Panic exploded. Helen grabbed his arms, trying to pull him out. Whitney crawled backwards, closing her eyes and covering her ears. I couldn't watch. All I heard was Helen screaming his name over and over. There was a gargle, a scream turning into an inhuman screech like a burning pig.
Sebastian!
Helen kept repeating.
Sebastian! Sebastian!
There was a click, and then nothing but crying. I looked up to see Helen collapsed against the study door. It had slid shut from the pressure on the other side.
I'm coming, Sebi.
She cried.
I'm...
She opened the door again, and there was the study, just as we'd left it. Helen collapsed on the floor, curling up into a fetal position. She kept making this childlike yowling, scratching the surface of the hardwood floor, as if trying to dig Seb back into reality. But there was nothing left, not even water droplets on the floor. Then there were her arms. She'd held on until the door had slammed shut. Her sleeves were torn and her arms bloody. Not much, but there were these round little suction marks. They were already bruising with spots of blood poking through the skin. I sat by Helen as Whitney started rifling through the study. There were more notebooks, more theories, more diaries, notes about experiments, clever tricks, and attempts. So far, every idea to understand the rules were in vain. We couldn't make sure. No matter what, we could never be truly sure. 2 open doors, 4 closed. I don't know how many hours passed. I managed to get Helen to the couch, but she was inconsolable. She could barely comprehend words anymore. She didn't blink, and she could barely breathe. There were no coherent thoughts in her mind, just darkness. This awful, soul-sinking darkness. Whitney propped up the open doors with books and towels to make sure they wouldn't accidentally close. All the while, she kept trying to convince herself.
We keep opening them one by one,
she said.
If we can get it to manifest in one single place and keep that door open, we should be able to leave by another.
The sun had started to set outside. For all intents and purposes, this still just looked like a house. The windows were clear, showing the greenery outside. Maybe it was all a lie. Maybe none of it was really happening. But looking down at Helen and her unblinking eyes, I knew it was the realest thing I'd ever experienced. There's 3 of us, I said. 4 doors. We can't make it.
No, that's perfect.
Nodded Whitney.
We open all but the front door. It manifests. Then we can get out through the one safe remaining door.
Unless we all die, there's nothing that says it can only be in one place.
It is implied,
said Whitney.
If you got a better plan, just tell me. But unless you want to starve to death, we gotta...
Starve? I interrupted. Is that what... I looked back at the study where Whitney said her father had died. No words were necessary. She took a deep breath and nodded.
He couldn't bring himself to try,
she said.
So we have to ask ourselves what we want. A long but certain death or a violent risk at life?
The fridge, the freezer, and all the cupboards had been cleared out. Whitney found some raisins for us to share while we pondered what to do. Helen couldn't eat. She stared blankly ahead, waiting for her mind to come wandering back. It was dark outside. Whitney rolled the bronze key between her fingers.
I wonder how he did it.
She sighed.
He never made any sense to me.
Maybe it doesn't make sense, I shrugged. At least not to us.
Then what made him so special?
Well, he did have a lot of books, I said, reaching into a pile we'd gathered from the study. Just look at some of these. Astrology of Abraham, Channels of Esoteric Geometry. I like this one, I said, holding up a little red book. Diary of Emmett Rask.
Right. But it doesn't beat the...
Whitney pulled out another book from the pile, turning it over.
The 13 Faiths of the Blameless Mother.
I shook my head, looking over at Helen. A handful of raisins slipped between her fingers. She didn't even bother closing her hand. Looking back at Whitney, I sighed. You're right, I said. We have to try. So we did. We lined ourselves up on the top floor. Helen on the far right near the bathroom. I was on the far left by the guest room. Whitney was in the middle by the bedroom. Helen didn't understand. She just mimicked us.
We're gonna open on 3.
Said Whitney.
And no matter what we see, just run. Run downstairs and just go. Get out.
I nodded. Helen didn't. 1. I tightened my grip. I saw Helen follow my lead, giving me an exhausted look. She could barely keep her eyes open. 2. I started doubting which way to turn the doorknob. I'd turned a million doorknobs throughout my life, but that was the first time I'd really thought about which way to turn it. I imagined myself hearing water, bubbles, distant rumbles. I tried telling myself that it was all imagined, fake, tricks of the mind. But in my heart of hearts, I knew it wasn't. 3, we opened our doors. All I saw was a well-made bed, a bag of toiletries, probably Whitney's. I left the door open and turned around. Helen was smiling as the darkness welcomed her.
Come on.
Whitney screamed.
Leave her.
The door to the bedroom was open, clear, but I was standing just 10 feet away from an endless abyss. Helen looked at it as if searching for something. She touched the surface with an outstretched hand.
Seb, honey.
She cried.
Sebby, please.
A pulse shot through her. I could see the hair on her arm stand up, her veins turning black.
Oh, Sebby.
In an instant, her flesh unraveled as it flayed itself from the inside out. Her scream stifled as something pulled her in, leaving splotches of blood behind from the outline of her feet. A pained moan escaped her, only to be turned to harmless bubbles and pressurized void. Whitney grabbed me by the neck and pulled me downstairs. We ran to the front door. We looked back a final time just to make sure it was still manifested upstairs. It was still there. We'd sacrificed Helen, but we'd make it out. Whitney pulled the front door open and stopped. Darkness. We'd been wrong. Whitney turned to run as an impossibly long arm grabbed the flesh of her back, straight through her clothes. It pulled her back. I crawled away, not being able to close my eyes.
Help me.
She cried out.
For God's sake, fucking help me.
I shook my head, not knowing what to do. I'll never forget those desperate eyes. The betrayal, the pleading. She fought every inch of the way. She dug her nails into the hardwood floor. She kicked, she pulled, she screamed. But for every second she stayed, the more painful it was. With a final snap, fingers dug into her spine, folding her like a lawn chair. A lifeless body dragged across the floor, unceremoniously pulled into the dark with a quiet squelch. And the door, slightly damaged by Seb and his crowbar, slid shut. I was all alone. The door to the guest bedroom and the main bedroom remained open. There was the bathroom and study downstairs. Just 2 closed doors left. The bathroom and the front door. Both closed, both wrong. There was no right answer. I must have stayed there for days. I found some trail mix in Whitney's bag. I had water. I could shower. I had a change of clothes. I scoured the notebooks over and over and over, trying to find the slightest hint on what to do. There had to be some way of knowing for sure. There had to be. It wasn't until I came across a final note that I realized it was over. It read, "By will alone, we cannot make ourselves right. Right is right, independently of our actions and intentions. We cannot control that which never was, and we cannot be part of that which will never be. There could be no more perils for me to face, and yet I cannot bring myself to leave. There's no certainty in the unknown, and I choose not to live by chance alone." I cried myself to sleep at night. I banged on the walls. I even tried opening a window only to have my left eardrum blown out from the pressure drop. Got a nasty nosebleed as well. I tried reading. I tried making up little worlds in my head. I imagined myself safe and sound, but it was useless. In those final hours of desperate loneliness, I knew I couldn't fool myself any longer. I was going to die. I found myself with my hand on the front door. I learned every crease of the wood, the temperature of the metal handle. I listened to it, studied it. At times, it was quiet. At other times, it wasn't. Sometimes I imagined it quiet. Other times, I imagined voices coming from the other side. Maybe I wasn't imagining it. Finally, I grasped the bronze key. Starving, exhausted, and mentally broken, I opened the front door. Sunshine. And there on the fresh-cut lawn was another realtor, just as confused as I was. So, turns out I was only in there for about 16 hours total. And to this day, no one seems to remember neither Anders, Seb, Helen, or Whitney. According to every document I can find, the owner of the house had no children. The cars parked outside were unregistered. On paper, it seemed like the entire world had forgotten that these people were ever part of this plane of existence. I don't think anyone's lying here. There was a sincere disbelief and confusion to every piece of my story. To onlookers, I seemed like a squatter that had gone insane. I've tried to find anything about this. They won't let me go back to read the notes. The investment firm who owns the real estate company swept it all under a rug and tore the place down. I suspect they were the ones who made the bronze key mysteriously disappear from the evidence room. I've tried to find copies of the books I found in there. Some of them have been seen in passing on strange message boards, and one just keeps making my computer turn off whenever I try to Google it. Who the hell is Emmett Rask anyway? If anyone knew these people or have heard about this phenomenon, please, I need to know I'm sane. I need to know this isn't all a dream. I need to know I won't wake up with my hand on that front door, having imagined living a life back outside. This has to be real. I am real. There is nothing on the other side of the door. Go ahead, listen. There's nothing there. It can't be. Can it?